I'm Frank Proto, professional chef and culinary instructor, and today I'm going to show you how to make the best brownies you've ever had. We're talking dark, decadent, delicious, fudgy brownies. This is Brownies 101. I personally like my brownies thin, dark, and fudgy. Fudgy brownies have so much more going for them than a cake-like brownie. Cake-like brownies are dry, they're a little spongy. These are chewy and gooey. They have a great mouthfeel, and they're just more satisfying than a light and fluffy brownie. You should prepare your pan before you start mixing any of your ingredients. You want it ready to go when your batter is ready. I have a 9x13 metal pan. You could use glass, but glass holds onto the heat, and I find that my brownies tend to overcook in glass, so that's why I like metal. Once you take it out of the oven, the heat dissipates a lot quicker. Because my pan is so deep, I like to line it with some parchment paper, and even though I'm using parchment paper, I want to be sure to butter it because I don't want the parchment to stick to the pan and I want it to come out really easy. So I'm going to get it really buttered well up on the sides, in the corners, right? And I want parchment just to be sure these brownies come out of the pan. I'm going to get it into the corners. And you see how that butter makes the parchment stick really well, which I love. And then what I do here, this is origami with Chef Frank. I want the parchment to cover the bottom of the pan. This little sling will hold our brownies into like a loaf and kind of keep that integrity of the brownies. They won't crumble and fall apart as we take them out. So you can see that I have my pan lined really well. Let's move on to making our batter. So I have all the ingredients laid out for my brownie batter. I'm gonna start with chopping up some chocolate that we're gonna sprinkle on top of our brownies before they go in the oven. And I don't mind if it's like different sizes, some big chunks, some small chunks. I like that you get the bite of that fudgy brownie and then a toothiness of the chocolate chip. When I put chocolate on top of the brownies, I like to use something that's not super sweet. So I tend to go for a bitter chocolate, something in the range of like, 70% cocoa. The brownies are sweet enough themselves. The chocolate is just gonna be a little bit of a bitter accent, which I really like. You can see that I'm not shy with the chocolate either. I use chopped chocolate instead of chocolate chips because this is just a better quality chocolate. Chocolate chips would be perfectly fine, but I find when you buy better ingredients, you get a better end product. Now that the chocolate's chopped, I can make the batter, and I like to start out with my dry ingredients. I'm gonna sift them. If you don't wanna sift them, you can always just put them in a bowl and whisk them together. I take the flour, goes into the sifter. If you don't sift, you could get lumps in your batter, and that is not pleasant. So we want to have all the dry ingredients combine really well so there's no lumps, okay? Cocoa powder. I try and find a nice dark cocoa powder like Dutch process, which makes the cocoa a little more mellow, but it makes it a lot darker and richer. With every recipe, I try and find the best ingredients I can buy. I tend to stay away from brands like Hershey's. It's an okay product. I just feel like it's bland and it's kind of like not dark enough and it doesn't have a lot of chocolatey flavor, believe it or not. I have my salt. I have my baking powder, which is my leavener. I have some instant coffee powder. Now, if you've never done instant coffee powder in your brownies, you really don't taste the coffee, but it's kind of a flavor enhancer to chocolate. So a little bit of coffee powder really does boost that chocolate flavor. So if you're worried about there being too much caffeine in your brownies, first of all, we only used a very small amount. Second of all, if you don't like it, you can take it out. Let's take my whisk and push this through into the bowl. If you look, there's kind of like little lumps and stuff like that, and that's not pleasant mouthfeel. You'll get a bite of salt, maybe you'll get a bite of dry cocoa, and it's not really delicious. Time for the wet ingredients. And part of the reason why I do my dry ingredients first is that I can blend them together and then I can use the same whisk because I don't want to clean two whisks to do my wet ingredients. So I have my white sugar and brown sugar. Now, the reason I'm using two sugars is the white sugar is there for just basic sweetness and the brown sugar has some richness from the molasses in it. It also helps make our brownie a little more fudgy and a little more gooey. Part of the reason I like to use my sugar as a wet ingredient is that sometimes brown sugar has lumps as well. And if you add it to the liquid ingredients, it breaks those lumps up and I don't want to have lumps of brown sugar, right? So I'm using some vegetable oil or neutral oil and I'm using some melted butter. So what the oil does is it makes our brownies nice and tender and fudgy. It gives the texture of the brownie that we want. Whereas the butter is giving us some flavor. Some vanilla extract and then 4 whole eggs. Of course we need eggs. Eggs are one of those things that like is the magic ingredient for most baked goods. They add moisture, they add fat, they add flavor, and they basically hold everything together. Eggs are the glue of baking. And then I'm just gonna break everything up. And now all I'm gonna do with this is really bring it together. If I have any lumps, break it up with a whisk, and just make sure it's combined really well. Now at this point, I can get rid of my whisk. What I'm gonna do is actually get it together with a rubber spatula. So one of the rules of thumb that I follow whenever I'm mixing a batter like this is I try not to overmix. For the most part, this batter has tons of fat in it. It has lots of cocoa powder in it, and to overmix it would be really hard, but we also don't want to activate that gluten and make these tough. So you want to get it till it's just smooth and there's no lumps, and then you're good to go. It comes together really nice and it looks super silky, and that's pretty much all you want. Make sure you scrape down to the bottom, scrape the sides, and then we can go into the pan. And if this is free flowing enough that it doesn't really need to be smoothed out all that much, you can just basically try to get it into the corners. Don't go too crazy, knocking any of the bubbles out. Now I can put my chocolate chips on, right? And I try and sprinkle them evenly. And I get to the edges and I get into the corners, because there's nothing worse than getting a corner piece or an edge piece that doesn't have chocolate chips. So be generous, not just piling them in the center. So now all we have to do is bake them. These are gonna go into a preheated 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes. Now, I say about because you want to look at the brownies. If you give them a little wiggle and they have just a little bit of shake in the middle, that's when you wanna take them out. Because believe it or not, when you take things out of the oven, they carry over. They continue to cook for about 3 to 5 minutes. So if you have a little bit of wiggle, take them out. They'll finish cooking out of the oven and you'll have a perfectly fudgy result. All right, these look really good. You can see, if you give it a little shake, you see there's a little shimmy, a little wiggle? That's what I want. Test your brownies before you take them out. You want it to be a little dirty, not liquidy. If it's still liquid when you poke it in the center with your knife or your toothpick, it's underdone and they're gonna be batter in the tray. So let them get to the point where they start to just rise a little and the knife or the toothpick comes out so it's a little dirty, not liquidy. If it comes out super clean, I kind of feel like brownies are overcooked. Maybe with cake it might be okay, but with brownies, you want it to come out a little on the dirty side. Make sure you're letting it sit until it's completely cool, right? It shouldn't be warm at all. It should be completely cool before you start cutting into it. They've been sitting and they've formed up really perfect. There's no like really dome in the center where it got cakey. They're gonna be really nice and fudgy. Okay, it's time to come out. I'm gonna just kind of go nice and easy because I don't want it to break. Make sure that it's loosened from the sides and I can lift it out nice and easy, right? So get rid of that with the old elbow. And you can see my brownie, because we took the time to put that parchment on there and butter it up, it comes out in one really nice piece. So a lot of times you see brownies come out with a crinkly, shiny top, and people see that as a hallmark of a good brownie. Now, I've had brownies with crinkly, shiny tops that are absolutely awful, right? I've had box brownies that have a crinkly, shiny top. It is not the hallmark of a good brownie. The hallmark of a good brownie is how it tastes, right? So if you don't get that shiny, crinkly top, don't stress out. It's still gonna be delicious. That is not the only thing that says what a good brownie is. I like generous sized brownies. I'm just gonna go in thirds here, and then nice, big, beautiful brownies. And then we can put them on a plate, but I want you to just see the inside there. It's moist, right? You can see that it's not like cakey and really like thick. Usually if you get a cakey brownie, it's gonna be big and puffy, but look at that. You can see that the chocolate chips are melty and not super firm. And here we have my perfectly baked, fudgy, chewy, gooey brownies. It is time to taste. First of all, I've got to point out, look how rich and dense these are. They have those chocolate chips on top. Okay, stop talking. A lot of times you get a brownie that does not deliver. It looks really dark. It doesn't taste chocolatey, but this thing is like a chocolate bomb. It's absolutely delicious. The chips on top offset the sweetness of the brownie itself. The texture is amazing. This is like the perfect brownie. Taking the time to do these from scratch and choosing the best quality ingredients you can get your hands on will always make these the best brownies you ever had. I got fudgy fingers. Edward Fudgy Fingers.